look forward to that as well.
Absolutely. And I think we should be able to start now. We're live.
Okay. Well, for those of you who have just joined us, whether via Facebook or YouTube or Zoom, welcome. My name's Kate Thorne. My day job is to be a priest for community engagement at St Matthew in the City. I'm a supporter of RDC, RD's CANS, I see it's often seen as, and I look forward to chairing this panel of young people. Our discussion tonight, discussion topic, as most of you will know, is religious diversity versus religious inclusivity. Panel of young people, Joseph, Aisha, and Tahiri will be speaking with us or speaking to us on as they share their wisdom, to share their views, their thinking and their experience. As we have managed to talk a little bit either via phone or via email, I become aware that speaking of religion or speaking religion or of religion in the public square can actually be quite a sensitive thing to engage with, although important if you are a person who is has journeyed somewhat on the faith journey. And perhaps it's more sensitive also if you are younger. I guess there's something about being somewhat vulnerable or somewhat, there's a certain amount of risk, I suppose, of putting yourself out there, even if you're speaking from your own experience. So I'm really grateful that each of you have made yourselves available this evening, and I'm really looking forward to hearing the wisdom of your generation for us to learn from. So I trust of those of us who, or those of you who've joined and perhaps choose to ask questions, will respect and honour each of their voices, even if what they say may differ from your own thinking. What I've been struck by in reading a little bit about each of you is how your faith formation, however that now finds expression, has moved you towards social activism, towards social engagement, towards justice, towards the preservation of our world, and to all sorts of other things I see that you're engaged in. We're here to learn from one another, and I believe we're here to create a safe space where honest and deep dialogue can flow about things that matter to us, that may matter to other young people around the world who have struggled to find a voice to speak safely together about things that might help us to live well for the good of the world. I hope that by this evening we may set an example in our world of how we can talk well together. So first of all, Joseph Thomas is an international PhD student from India. He's doing research in developing robust flight controllers for unmanned aerial vehicles, which sounds very, very mind-blowing. He's an electronics engineer by profession, although I understand you read history books in your free time. You also work actively from within the Indian diaspora to raise awareness among New Zealanders on the ongoing human rights violations against religious and ethnic minority communities in India. So, Joseph, you can share more of your life and faith and work in your own words. I'm sure you will as you speak to us. So let us hear your voice on the topic of religious diversity versus religious inclusivity. Welcome.
Thanks, Kate. First, let me thank the Religious Diversity Center for giving me the space to speak. So I'll begin by recalling an incident which happened early this year. Like in February this year, we were kind of organizing like a solidarity demonstration in ATS Square. So I think 15 of us, we came together and we were about to begin our demonstration. And then, so the demonstration was regarding trying to raise awareness against a law which was passed in the Indian Parliament in December 2019. So this is the Citizenship Amendment Act, trying to discriminate a community of people within India based on religion. So we were about to begin our demonstration when this young guy came along and he said, guys, we have 2 minutes to spare to listen to the good news from Jesus Christ. So we were like, look, that's very good news, but we are about to start a demonstration. So we are trying to support the Muslim community against who are at the receiving end of the this discriminatory law. So he's like, oh, that's all right, that's fine. So I expect all of you are from the Muslim community. So we were like, no. So I'm an atheist. We have Hindus, Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, people from the Sikh community, probably half a dozen different religious denominations here, coming together to against injustice. So, and he was kind of taken aback. So he kind of said, don't worry about it. I'm going to pray for the success of the demonstration. And then we were like, oh, that's pretty good. And he went away. So, you know where I'm kind of trying to get towards. So the way I look at it, it's that is an example of a small group of people who transcended their religious differences. And they didn't stop at being religiously diverse. So they went ahead and, they understood that like human beings are more than just, more than just religions. So we are beyond that. And we acknowledge our differences, but we have to come together when injustice is being perpetrated against a particular community. So we all saw that in 2019 in New Zealand when the Christchurch incident happened. Like people across New Zealand came together and stood shoulder to shoulder, trying to defeating this extremist tendencies. So the question is like, why do we need more of such networks and spaces where young and old people can come together and speak? Like progressive ideas can come together. So we are living in interesting times. Like we speak and learn from within from inside our virtual bubbles. We wage our battles in social media, and then many a times the support which we get, it's from inside these echo chambers. So like when we search for answers in Google, and the results which we get back, it simply reinforces our own ideas. So this is something which Peter Coffin explains in his book, Custom Reality and You. So the idea is that, so what Peter tells us that when we get into Google, we are actually inside a customized universe, customized for us. So the business model is such that it makes sure that the search results keep making us happy. And the result of this is polarization along communal and religious and political lines. Like we saw that in the US during the US elections, it's happening in India as well. It's happening in many different countries. There used to be that culture of consensus building where people sit together and talk, look eye to eye, and talk and debate and learn from each other and compromise. And that culture is disappearing. And thanks to these algorithms, we are becoming increasingly polarized. So, and what is the antidote for this tendency? The only way to kind of defeat this tendency is to identify and stand together with those progressive voices. We will have to reach out to communities and bring those progressive voices and fill in the spaces which might get hijacked by the extremist voices in case we don't do it. So now there's a second tendency for this polarization. So as like coming from an Indian community, this is something which I experienced. Like there is always this tendency to use like a broad brush to paint one particular community as backward or the other community as extremist. So it's easy and it simplifies things. So there is this tendency to simplify. And so I'll give another quick summary. So there was this incident which happened last year in my state back home in Kerala. So that's where I'm from in India. So there's this temple called Sabrimala where so women from between ages of 12 and 50 are not supposed to enter the temple because so women in that age group are going through their menstruation age, and that makes them impure according to the sacred golden tradition, right? So they are refused entry. Now, the Supreme Court of India, they said this law is discriminatory. The place for this tradition is inside the bin, and the Supreme Court said that we're going to strike this tradition out. But what happened was the right wing from within the state tried to use this as an opportunity to sow discord between the people in my state. Now, I was talking about this with a Kiwi friend of mine. So the friend kind of came along and said, "Oh no, Joseph, this is sacred tradition, right? So women shouldn't be going to the temples." And I was kind of taken aback a bit. So I could kind of feel that push, kind of trying to push me back into that backward basket. You belong to the basket. Go ahead, go back. So and I had to kind of fight my way back, saying like, no. Are you going to ask women in New Zealand to do that? And then it started coming back to him. So this tendency to put people, like try to brush entire communities as backward or extremist. I wouldn't blame people. It comes from that same, same virtual bubble situation. Now, again, so trying to conclude, if you can maintain a space that embraces diversity and more importantly, inclusivity, in the sense like if each of us can acknowledge our differences and at the same time look forward to learn from each other. So if you can do that, then we can start to begin to form a front against a resistance front against these polarizing forces out there. And such a space would serve as a disruption, like as a disruptor to those echo chambers and those virtual bubbles inside which we are trapped. So yeah, so I think this is a great initiative by the Religious Diversity Center to try to create the space and bring in young people from across the country, get them together and speak to each other and reclaim that conversation, eye to eye conversation. That's about it. Thanks again, Kate.
Thank you, Joseph. You can breathe now. Thank you for your honesty and for sharing with us your own out of your lived experience. And I love the idea of the fact we can stand together, the importance of creating place for honest conversation, place to speak to one another that's safe, because that's the only way we're really going to learn. So thank you. Aisha. Aisha is currently working as a marketing and communications consultant. Along with her professional work and all her spare time, Aisha has worked with the Karija Leadership Network on the Al Hijra project as a researcher and an interviewer, and that's a project that focused on highlighting the contributions of Muslim women in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And now, Aisha, in the other bit of spare time, you're developing your own initiative, #Adulting, a project that provides a safe social space for youth to navigate gender dynamics and deconstruct social norms. So Aisha, in all those amazing things that you're doing, maybe you would like to share with us a bit of how you respond to this topic, religious diversity versus religious inclusivity, and I'm sure your faith and works will speak for you. But Aisha, welcome.
Thank you, Kate. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'd like to open with a short pepeha. Kia ora tātou, ko manga whao te moanga, ko waitema te awa, no tamaki ahau, ko Islam te whakapono, ko Asif toko whānau, ko Aisha toko inua. Greetings, everyone. Eden is my mountain, Waitemata is my river. I'm from Auckland. Islam is my faith. Asif is my family. Aisha is my name. I'd like to acknowledge here that I do not claim any ancestral relationship with the mountain, water, and land, but they have sheltered and provided for me, and for this I am grateful. Now, before I begin speaking on the religious diversity versus inclusion, I'd like to state that I am neither an expert nor an academic in this field. My perspective and experience is subjective. It may or may not be aligned with your views. However, the intention is to initiate healthy dialogue, not attack or disrespect anyone's views or identity. Now, Kate, my perspective or my views on this topic are slightly different. And I believe religious diversity and inclusion cannot be separated. They will need to work together if we are to promote a congruous society. Now, the Global Data Project by the PEW Research Center estimates that we'll have about 2.3 billion more religiously affiliated people by 2050. Now, compared with just 0.1 billion more religiously unaffiliated people. And despite the common narrative, this shows that religion is not in decline. And with thousands of known religions across the globe, society as well as the economic world shouldn't be afraid to actually approach this subject. Now, faith is already an important part of people's lives and in the marketplace, so to be religiously tone deaf is a strategic liability. Faith-friendly workplaces, community spaces, schools, and even governments can actually enable individuals to successfully navigate a more religiously diverse planet. Google has already earned top ranking among the Fortune 100 companies for religious inclusion, And this is based on results from the Religious Freedom and Business Foundation's new Corporate Religious Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Index. Now, because there are plenty of avenues we can delve into with this broad topic, I'd like to focus my views on two key areas that promote faith diversity and inclusion. First is education. True diversity is about affirming and engaging right at the beginning. It could mean school education, home environmental education, and for an example, I come from India, and the religious diversity in India is embedded in the fabric of the country. So growing up, we are already exposed to various faiths through our peers, and hence are aware of different practices and faiths that are existing. Now, however, in a country where other faiths are a growing minority, it could be worthwhile to introduce faith in education and engagement with other communities, as I said, right from the beginning. A step further is to then understand the difference between faith and culture. Now, example, as I previously mentioned, that I identify as a Muslim, and Islam is my faith. Now, using that as an example, using within my experience as an example, it's not un-Islamic for genders to interact in social settings. It's not un-Islamic for women to take lead and work and have successful careers, etc. Now, the scriptures don't state, and the scriptures don't state any such practices. It's rather the convenience of some leaders to dominate the space, dictate, and even shape the context in ways that just benefit them. Hence, making it cultural, but the fact still remains that it's not what Islam promotes. So there is a distinct differentiation between what Islam or what faith is and what then the culture then becomes. This then brings me to the second key factor, diversity. Faith isn't exclusive, and that's just a fact. It's for anyone, it's for everyone to adopt, and this means men, women, the LGBTQ+ community, the transgender community, everyone. Excluding a certain group is not sustainable. Now, in the business world, the way we recognize our customer base, and I should know this, in marketing, we recognize our customer base so very well. Religious institutes or leaders also probably need to adopt the same format of recognizing the religious consumer base, because, as I said, we're going to have billions of people identifying themselves with a certain religious faith. Now, this brings a host of different perspectives to how we can accommodate everyone. And the responsibility not only lies with the leaders or with the community or with the religious organizations, but it also lies with the people, as we don't necessarily feel it's our right to ask for what we want in that space, in the religious space. So for us to just stick up a hand and say, I want this, or we want this as a group, is not very common. And we could also create that space for ourselves and probably take that little bit of initiative or courage to ask, how can we know that this ex-religious community, institute, or leader is accommodating for women's concerns, LGBTQ concerns, and men's concerns, etc. And just because someone doesn't look the religious part doesn't necessarily mean they don't practice and participate in their culture, faith-based or religious-based values. Now, that again, as an example, I could say, if I don't look the stereotypical Muslim with the hijab, that doesn't necessarily mean I don't practice Islamic values or Islamic principles, and I don't lead my life in that sense. So reiterating that faith isn't exclusive, it's for all. If we are to promote a congruous society, we need to actively use religious diversity as a tool for religious inclusion. And those are my 2 cents on the topic.
Thank you, Aisha. There was a lot packed into your, I haven't got enough time. Thank you. A lot to think about. I really enjoyed the knowledge that you shared and brought to that. And as a person that happens to operate within a religious organisation, I love the challenge you put out there about how businesses operate, and maybe we could find some modelling for that for ourselves. So, yeah, thank you. Tahiri, you, I see here, are also doing a PhD. Yay! But you're a lecturer in sociology from the National University of Samoa. and you're currently doing your doctoral studies at Otago, looking at the role that spirituality is playing in motivating youth activism. Whoops, something went crash. Youth activism and advocacy in the Pacific. So your own social action has been fostered by your faith as a Baha'i. You're a chairperson for the Pacific Youth Council, and that's an NGO that empowers young people to become active citizens and leaders across the Pacific. And you had some association with US President Barack Obama, I see, and the Obama Foundation for the Asia Pacific Leaders Program. Well, Tahiri, maybe you would like to share with us something of your take on religious diversity and religious inclusivity. Welcome.
Thank you, Kate. And also thank you to my fellow panelists. I join and I agree with my other two panelists with some of the points that they've already shared on. And so I guess for me, I just wanted to just highlight two key points as a contribution to this panelist, and then hopefully continue the conversation after as well, with given the time. I guess my disposition on the theme of our panel discussion, I believe diversity is something that we currently experience, and diversity is, of course, it's a beautiful thing that we have in our societies, but the challenge then lies in how to be inclusive within a diverse society. It's so easy to acknowledge, and it's so easy to see and observe diverse peoples from different backgrounds and so forth. But again, the challenge then lies in how are we bringing people together? How are we bringing people from diverse backgrounds together? How are we creating that inclusiveness in a diverse society? And how do we try and include everyone in something? So I just wanted to contribute 2 points as a contribution to this conversation around having a diverse and inclusive society. I think diversity and inclusion, should not be separate. And so it's a question of how do we bring these together, and how does it look like, and what can constitute to having a diverse and inclusive society and communities. So the first one I wanted to highlight was around the principle of unity in diversity. I think, one of the keynotes of an approach to I guess, having that social organization within a society is not about uniformity, but it's about this unity in diversity. And of course, this principle of unity, diversity also needs, a lot of unpacking in terms of what makes, what do we mean by unity and diversity? But I think one underlying factor about this principle of unity and diversity is it's not about uniformity, but rather about unity. And so, this principle of unity and diversity is also, a socio-ecological philosophy that can also describe this sense of oneness. And when we talk about this sense of oneness, it means that we look at a diverse community beyond physical and psychological barriers and physical and psychological differences. And so, with this principle grounded on unity without uniformity, this helps to, establish I think this principle of unity and diversity establishes a universally recognized concept of unity. There is need for an acceptance that universal principles exist, and this principle of unity and diversity is one principle that is universally accepted or in agreement with everyone, I think. Like these principles are reflected in terms of values that apply to each and every human being. And these principles also lie at the core of all religions and are also notable in our cultures. And so, for example, the values of universal brotherhood, love for one's neighbor, and then, of course, the golden rule of treating others as you would like to be treated yourself. And these are just some of the ideals that are common to all our cultures, and it's common to all religions as well. And so, talking about diversity versus inclusivity, I think it's really about this principle about unity and diversity, and it's not about uniformity, but rather about this oneness of mankind. The second one I wanted to highlight and also pinpoint is diversity without fragmentation. And so here we're talking about diversity, religious diversity, and then religious inclusivity and inclusion. And so we can't look at these, we can't fragment diversity from inclusion or vice versa. I think if we really unpack what diversity should look like, it must be embedded with inclusion. But then again, this ties back to the first principle of unity and diversity. It's about inclusion. It's not about whether you are conforming or you are in uniform with each other, but rather through mutual understanding, you are able to understand and have that respect towards the differences of others. And so with this, having diversity without fragmentation, I think the manifold systems of religious beliefs, it should never be allowed to foster the feelings of animosity, hatred, racism, discrimination, and so forth among people. And so, it's quite obvious that societies are becoming more and more secular, and in many instances, religion is starting to be, there's a lot of bashing towards religion. And so I think it's important to go back and really, look at the role of religion and how, because religion, it's unquestionable that religion, it does cause conflict, but it also has a major role to play in terms of, creating a unified and inclusive society. So I guess, the principles and laws from our, religious systems, they've all proceeded from one source, and they differ from one another is to be attributed to the varying requirements of, the different ages that we have come through. And I just feel that we need to have more conversations, and especially for young people. I know from my experience that, despite all the different religious backgrounds that we come from, but one of the common things that brings young people together and puts young people on the same page is this, is that we are all trying to build better communities, and we all want to live in better communities and better societies. And so, we all have that united and common thought around building better communities. And so, and I think part of that as well, part of that unity and thought amongst young people towards building better communities is also influenced by their religions and their religious belief systems and so forth. And so I think, that's very valuable and significant as well. Now with these two principles, unity and diversity, and then of course looking at diversity without fragmentation, I think the application of these require, one, rising above religious dogmas, rising above political ideologies and national allegiances, which are bitterly dividing people in societies. And this also entails that we need, entails the restating of, the fundamental truths that lie behind all religions and philosophies and our traditions. And in the consideration of these principles and these values also leads us to recognize that the oneness, also helps to lead people to recognizing the concept of the oneness of the entire human species, and I think that's really at the core of diversity and inclusion, is just, we need to recognize this oneness of the entire human species. And then of course, that also helps us to assure the freedom of individual opinion, the protection of individual rights, irrespective of race, color, religion, nationality, or class, and so forth. And then, of course, encouraging, it also helps to encourage the full participation of minorities in the life of community building and societal processes. And then lastly as well is, the encouragement of diversity of opinions has, acknowledging that the encouragement of diversity of opinion has important implications on both our beliefs and our actions, as individuals in the community. And it's, of course, our individual interpretations is, it fruits from our rational power and that, but must be conducive to having a better understanding of, the teachings of our different faiths, the philosophies that we study and so forth, and that we learn about, and provided that, no disputes or arguments arise among people. And that for the individual himself or herself understands and makes it clear that his views or her views are merely his own, and I think this also constitutes a lot of conflict is more about trying to impose your own beliefs on others rather than just kind of having that meaningful conversation in a loving manner, and try and establish that mutual understanding between each other, and so forth, and just kind of also detach. I think one of the things as well can contribute to this is trying to detach ourselves from our opinions and our views, and being open to that attitude of sharing for the sake of trying to establish a mutual understanding. And, that can all contribute to having inclusion. in diverse settings, or in a diverse society. So
thank you. Thank you, Tahiri. Lots of wisdom there. I'm interested in how each of you has kind of taken a slightly different view, which is great, because there's 3 different people. There's more than 3 different people, and there's 3 of you with your own place you find yourself in relationship to this. I was interested because I just had a bit of thinking about this because I'm allowed. And one of the things that struck me in the topic itself about religious diversity versus religious inclusivity, whether we should have a versus in the middle at all. I wondered myself whether or not they're alternate ways to understand and express our experience. I also did wonder, though, that whether if we focus on one, if we take one, say, example, we start to speak about our religious diversity or our diversity, whether that could cause us to pay more attention to how different we are from one another, to what's exclusive about our religion that we might align ourselves with, or if you're not aligned at all, to not be aligned at all. And therefore we direct our attention inwards. Our focus becomes about accentuating our differences, and potentially leads to a bit of suspicion of others. I'm not to say that we shouldn't be diverse, but it's just where our attention and our energy might become focused. If we were to speak about our inclusivity, it made me wonder about whether we might pay more attention to the common ground between us, because the way that we uniquely from our diversity can contribute to the common good with those that we share the space with. Because if we say that we're included and we want to include others, therefore we've already said that we share the space. And then I think we start to have conversations about how we can contribute and how we can bring our energies and our resources to the many compounding needs. And I was really struck, I was reading recently something by Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, unfortunately, who's recently died, his book on morality. And he spoke about when he was the chief rabbi, and he worked with many, many faiths. And he said that how we consider how we can act, in his words, driven by the ethical and spiritual values of our respective faiths. That as we pay attention to the needs around us, to the resources we bring, that how we can connect and contribute with and in our communities. And to quote him, he says, by being uniquely what we are, we contribute to society only what we can give. Now, obviously in this context, he's speaking of different religions, but I think we can include in that the fact that we need to be, it sounds, and what I hear you saying is we need to be in conversation with one another. We need to find a way to negotiate that space, because together we can potentially activate to make big changes in the world which needs us. I've had somebody write in a question. This is an easy one for all of you, and you can take your time thinking about it. How can we enlighten religious people to have higher tolerance levels when people question the sensitive parts of their religion or cultural practices, especially when it's to do with the well-being of an individual within that religious or cultural group? Do I need to repeat it?
I think we've got it.
Yeah, you've got it on the chat, yeah?
Yeah, on the chat. Joseph, do you want to take this one?
It would be good if Kate can repeat it.
All right.
Oh, can you see it in the chat? Can you see it in the chat at all, Joseph? It's toward the bottom. Second to last question, or second to last comment. How can we enlighten religious people to have higher tolerance level when people question the sensitive parts of their religious or cultural practices, especially when it's to do with well-being of individual within that religious or cultural group?
Well, Aisha can go ahead.
I think there is there are a lot of experiences I'm pretty sure everyone would have had in terms of how people, and as we kind of established in the early times of this conversation, that religion can become a very sensitive topic for a lot of people. And I think how can people have higher tolerance levels? I think it'll only happen when we place ourselves in conversations and with people who we not necessarily completely agree with, or do we don't necessarily see eye to eye with. And that's just my perspective on that, right? So in terms, if I don't completely understand another faith, unless I go and interact with them, or unless I completely engage and give my sincere effort to see things from that perspective, I will not then have any idea of how do we actually engage, or how do we accept, or how do we see from the two sides of the perspective, right? Or two sides of the coin or the conversation. So I'm only seeing from my end and I'm not seeing the others. So I would say to have high tolerance, it would just mean you need to have educated yourself on others' perspective and to have respect for the others, as well as for your own religion, of course. But yeah, I think that would be my key, suggestion or take on that, for sure.
Thank you, Aisha. Did you want to pass comment? Either Joseph or Tahiri?
Yep, I can go ahead. Well, the way I would respond to the question is, I think from my perspective, being an atheist, there is only one. So there is only one criteria which I apply when it comes to when we have a conversation with people. I try to bring people back to that. Trying to. So if we have a question to discuss on, I kind of try to bring them back to science. So let's see what science tells us about it. Let's see which is best in terms of, so rather than trying to persuade people, I try to put out the evidence out there. They're saying, look, this is what's happening on the ground, and this is what science tells us. Now, I mean, that's my perspective. It's not that I would be shutting myself out. Also, so say my like there are militant atheists who become aggressive from minute one. That's not going to help, definitely. But we have to reach a consensus, but it has to be, it has to be based on something, something which is evidence based and something which is more scientific, so that we have something to hold on to. Well, that's the way I would approach any discussion. And again, I think one thing which we have to, I would keep in mind is that, yes, not everybody would do that. Like there are people who might base their arguments on faith. So I will have to acknowledge that. But if someone asks me, like if a youngster comes along and asks me, what can I do about it? So that would be my advice to him. Look, there are these things which you can rely on, and you can use that if you are feeling confused. Yeah, so that would be my take on that.
How about you, Tahiri?
Yeah, I was just thinking, and the principle of the independent investigation of reality comes to mind with this in this regard. Each religion has its own religious system, and therefore has its own system of a clergy or a church minister and so forth. But with the independent investigation of truth, or independent investigation of reality, even though having that particular system of a clergy or church ministers in place, this principle is really about the responsibility of it's about the individual's right and duty to investigate on their own and decide what they believe in on their own. So instead of just adhering to, instead of just having the adherence or just following ancestral or traditional beliefs without first questioning and without examining our own inner landscapes, we we all have that right, that individual right and duty to investigate the truth for ourselves. And this also means, that we have to have an open mind. I think having an open mind is important and is key, because then, having an open mind means that we use our own mental faculties, and we use our own hearts, and we use our own spirits to determine what we believe in, and also helps to channel our own individual pathways within, the societies that we live in. And I also feel that, sometimes when we what do we mean by religious people? Because through my research, a lot of young people are saying that they are not religious, but they are spiritual. They don't follow a particular church, yet they still believe in a God, or they still believe in God and have faith in God, And so, who are we really talking about or referring to when we mean by enlightening religious people? But yeah, I think, yeah.
Thank you, Tahiri. It is interesting. It's a really interesting thing to dig into as well. We're using these terms, religion, religious. I wonder what they mean for a generation that has less been part of perhaps organised religion, or certainly been less influenced by it in the sense that an older generation might have been. I think that's a really important thing for us to be talking together about. I see there's another one here which I think is a really interesting question. I don't know if you see there. Why do religions not talk about inclusivity, secularism and tolerance in places where they're majority, and they talk more about tolerance in places that are minorities? I think it's interesting. It reflects a little bit off the one above, which is a comment about sometimes our differences can be the very things that draw us together. Well, sorry, that's my interpretation of it. The difference, if we understand the differences between us, then we accept the differences, not only the similarities. I think there's some, at least to me, I see a connection.
I absolutely agree. I think there is a connection in that space, right? And I see the conversation that there has to be, we have to acknowledge the similarities, yes, and there is the conversation that, all faiths have a common ground, or there's a common theme that we all work with, which is unity, peace, and forgiveness and love. And this is something that is true for all religions. However, what's the beauty about, I guess, each religion is that the differences actually are so unique in itself that we can look at it as a way of uniting everyone together. But then again, that only happens if you are aware of what are the differences and how unique and how advantageous are they for them, for that certain group, or how they celebrate it and how they accept it. If I don't have the understanding of that, then I would not look at it from the perspective that, oh, this is something great and this is something beautiful. I would probably come from the other side of it, which is like, oh, this is not what I do, so this is probably not comfortable for me in that conversation, right? And coming to the other question of why religious majorities don't really talk about inclusion, secularism, and tolerance in places where they are a majority, I guess that, in my opinion, has more to do with what works for them. So if there is a majority in a certain country, now again, I would probably refer back to my experience in India, that if there is a majority, there are a lot of things that are accommodated for the majority, because there is a large number, there is a lot of demand for a certain way of living, and that is accommodated for them. However, we tend to forget the minorities, is because there's not much demand. So if you look at it from that demand supply kind of lens, right? There is not a lot of demand for such for such religious practices, for such religious places. So we're not necessarily going to look at it because that's not what works for us, or that's not what we do. Now, it also doesn't help if leaders come from a space of the religious majority and do not have the capacity or the ability to look at the country or all factors of the population from a holistic point of view. There is more in the sense that we have this, and this is what we're going to cater for, regardless of who else is there. That's not our problem. So the majorities, I guess, if they are a majority in a country, a lot of things are working for them. Hence, there is no need, there's no actual need for them to think about in another minority, because that doesn't really affect them as much as it affects a minority in that sense.
So in some ways, there's a sense in which there maybe there needs to be an intentioned decision for us to work to say that each part of us, whether minority or majority, contribute, but the majority need to perhaps be a little bit more, have a bit more humility, use a particular type of language, or an actual interest in that which makes up the total. So I guess what I also hear you saying is that, and perhaps me reading it as well, is that you don't need to tolerate someone that's a minority if you're a majority. They're just there.
Yeah, and unless you have the, I guess, the sensitivity or the responsibility, because being a majority in a certain country also comes with a lot of privileges and the very big responsibility that you need to look after the others, because we are a codependent society. We are not independent. We're not very individualistic as such. If you look at communities, we do need to look out for each other, and excluding a certain group or excluding a certain religious faith is not something that will work forever. So if you are looking at the wider growth of even the majority community, you have to look at the other parts of it. So you're just going to constantly be in that clash till the end of the days, because you're not looking at everyone. So there is always going to be backlash, or there is always going to be question or pushback from the other side.
And I guess also, Joseph, it comes for those who don't find themselves standing in a faith place.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yep. Adding on to what Aisha said. Yep, I completely agree with what Aisha said. Just a quick add-on. So I think it, whether be it religious or linguistic or based on sexual orientation, like a minority community begins to raise their voices only when they begin feeling that heat from that oppression. So that's when they begin organizing under a particular tag and begin coming together and begin to stand up. So when in a country you start seeing voices coming from a particular minority group, when they are starting to stand up for themselves, that actually shows that yes, something has broken down. Like there is like for example in India we have we kind of are beginning to see that it's kind of becoming like a like the dictatorship of the majority kind of situation. So whenever we begin hearing voices, that actually means that something has broken down. So yeah. So when it comes to, so the reason why a religious community, they begin voicing concerns, is because they are feeling oppressed, and the heat is coming along. And again, in many countries, these religions, like the minorities and the majorities, they don't have any concerns, just because they are tolerant. They accommodate each other, and there is no need for that. There might not be that need for that, standing up for themselves. So as the oppression goes away, the significance of the tag behind which they organize goes away. But as long as that oppression is there, they have to organize in order to stand against that oppression which is coming along. So yeah.
Yeah, I think also I hear, well, in my taking from that a little bit also, is that if the minority, as you say, if there's an oppression which is agitating for grassroots movements, which you see in both not just religious, but also in social activism for issues around social justice, is that it seems to be almost an indicator of the health of a society, that it can pay attention that it's actually broken in some way, that needs the voice of those who haven't been heard to be heard, and to invite them in to that space. Now, I'm just conscious that we're coming close to, sorry, my dog is acting up in the background. We're coming close to the end of our time together, and I'm wondering, Tahiri, I realise I haven't asked you your response to that one. I really appreciated what you were saying in your previous one about the individual responsibility to understand their faith and to be responsible, not just put it on the listen to those who have authority and speak that, but to actually consider within themselves or in a landscape. I really love the way that you language that, and I guess that is that thing also about having a sense of mutual, of individual responsibility. And I think there's something also for me about dignity and stature, that if we have a sense of our own inner dignity and stature, then we're more likely to want to know that in another. So there's something about mutual recognition. But as we are coming to a close, I'm wondering if there's anything that any of you might like to sort of say as a conclusion, if you can remember what you said.
I think I'll just respond in regards to that question of why religions are not talking about inclusivity and so forth. And as a concluding remark as well, I think maybe I mean like for each religion, conventionally its role is to foster that spiritual development for people. And one common thing that we have, no matter what religion, is that we all have this sense of a transcendent reality in which we are trying to attain. And so religion helps us pave our way towards that transcendence or that transcendent reality. But in regards to this question, I was just thinking, maybe because we need to look, religions need to have an outward looking, because I think conventionally we have this, each church or each religion has this inward looking. You have a population of people within that particular setting in which you are fostering, this spiritual development and taking them through a spiritual development process. But I think we lack on having that outward look towards the wider society from this religious box that we are in. So what I mean about this is, how are we connecting the teachings from our own religions towards the issues and towards the problems that the world that we are encountering in the societies in which we live. So that's what I mean by we need to have this, and we need to foster this outward looking, whereby we learn and we try to embody the teachings, the religious and the beliefs from within each of our religions. But how are we having that outward looking where we can apply these beliefs to the betterment of the world and the communities that we live in? Because if we have that outward looking, it means that we need to talk about the problems. We need to talk about the social issues that are happening in the society, and that includes, looking at inclusion, looking at secularism. So, I think having that outward looking and also bringing into the conversation the roles of religion towards, creating better societies and better communities can build that outward looking, and therefore have those conversations.
Thank you, Tahiri. So it seems to me that we need to find a way to keep talking to one another. So Joseph and Aisha, we've got probably a minute or two. My timing's all out to everyone else's, so if you'd each like to just do a concluding statement so I can then say, well, I'm saying a big thank you now in case.
Yep, I'll quickly say something before we wind up. So I think the one last statement which we have to take away from this, at least up to according to me, is let's not ignore those progressive voices from within different communities. So they are not the fringe, rabble-rousing elements. These progressive voices are getting attacked inside their communities as well, and they are the ones who are trying to come together. So let's keep them and let's support them. And again, yeah, let's keep talking. So let's keep talking and building these networks. Let's do it. Yeah.
Thank you, Joseph. And Tahiri, this was really good to hear your perspectives on the conversation, on the topic, as well as have those conversations about the diversity and inclusion, right? I think to add as a last point, I think it's important for me to state that there is a difference between inherited faith and the faith you choose. And this, I feel this is more important for me to say is because in the conversation, there's someone who said, just let me know. And following up from what Tahiri said is that let us know about each religion, give me the right to choose, and teach me how to accept others' choices, which is absolutely right. And we inherit faith as we are born, or we inherit the beliefs as we are born, and then form our own understanding of it. But how often do we grow up and then say, this, I've read about the religion, this is what I agree with as an individual, and this is what I don't agree with as an individual, and how can I use that to shape this for me and what works for me? And I guess in that sense, if we are looking at religion from the lens that its religion is personal, it's their personal choice. The fact that you would not judge anyone for eating a certain thing, you should not be judging someone for choosing a certain faith. So acceptance is at its topmost priority within that space, and respecting that everyone's choices are just that, it's their choice, and it's not for us to judge or speak against for. So in that sense, as I want to conclude with saying that, to reiterate as well, is that religion is not exclusive, it is inclusive, and it is for all.
Thank you, Aisha. I don't feel I should have the last word. I'm not considered amongst the youth. However, I do want to thank each of you, Tahiri, Aisha, and Joseph, for sharing with us your difference, your passion, your willingness to engage. And I really, really hope that we can continue this conversation. I know that not all of us are in the same place, but we can connect via Zoom by this. And thank you. Thank you all for your faith, for your activism, for your willingness to challenge and to choose and to contribute to the state of our world. May it be improved by your activism and your enthusiasm.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you, Audience, for this great opportunity.
Thanks a lot. See you soon, we hope.
See you. Yeah.